Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our ETC Network online discussion on virtual stakeholder and public engagement. As you're aware, we're running a series of these events over the last number of weeks, and this is the final topic in our series, based on the feedback we would have obtained from you as members at previous events, where you specifically advised that you had an interest in learning a little bit more about virtual stakeholder and public engagement. The format of this morning is very informal, and we hope that everyone will interact and actively participate in the discussion on this topic. There will be an opportunity after our keynote address to put questions, comments, or have a discussion in relation to the subject matter. You can put questions to Kate Morris from Campus Engage, who is our keynote speaker, or to Stefan Koch, who is from UPC and Cork Transport and Mobility Forum, or to other participants, or to members of the Southern Regional Assembly. Myself and Karen Coughlin are here this morning. As I mentioned at our last event, there's no bad questions, except the ones that you don't ask, okay? This is a very safe environment for everyone to participate and hopefully to learn from one another, which will hopefully assist you in creating a network of stakeholders and public members of the public and citizens for your projects, for your research going forward. I'd like to hand you over now to Karen Coughlin, my colleague, who will take you through housekeeping for today. And I'd like to hope that each and every one of you enjoys and benefits from participating in the event. Thank you.
Thanks, Rose, and welcome to everybody to today's event. As Rose said, my name is Karen Coughlin. I, along with Rose, work as an EU project officer here in the Southern Regional Assembly. Before we start, I'm just going to take you through a little bit of housekeeping in terms of the event. I know we're all familiar with these online platforms at this stage, but just to run through today's housekeeping. So just to remind you all that we are recording the event and we will be taking screenshots throughout. We'd ask that everybody switches their camera off and their microphone to mute at all times, just not to interfere with the connectivity today, as we have a large group on today. We'd ask that only the host and the speaker keep their camera on at all times throughout the event. When we do start the discussion and the questions, if you do want to ask a question, make a comment, just make an input into the discussion, we'd ask that you turn your camera on, and our host Stefan then will call on you to speak in the order that the cameras come on. If it is the case that Stefan doesn't see you, myself and Rose will be keeping an eye on the cameras in the background as well, and we'll draw Stefan's attention to your camera if it is. So rest assured, we will get to everybody that turns their camera on. And again, once you've finished, we'd ask that you turn off your camera and switch your microphone to mute again. I think everybody's familiar with these platforms, but those that maybe aren't familiar with the GoToMeeting, you can hover along the bottom of the screen and you should see a camera icon and a microphone icon, and just by clicking those you have control over turning them on and off. We also have the chat function here today, so if you want to ask a question via that, just type it in, and again we will be keeping an eye on that throughout the event. If it is the case that anybody does lose connection, don't worry, just use the link again to come back in. If that doesn't work, I'm going to ask Catherine now, Catherine Connaughton, our colleague who is looking after the technical side of things today, just to put her email address into the chat, and if everyone just takes note of that, any problems you can just contact her directly via her email. Okay, so just before I pass over to Stefan, I just wanted to draw your attention to two upcoming events under the Northwest Europe programme. As some of you might be aware, we are home to the Northwest Europe contact point here in the Southern Regional Assembly, which covers the whole country, that's the whole of Ireland. Unfortunately, Sarah couldn't join us today, but she just asked us that we would alert you to two events coming up. So they have the first of two, what they call interactive networking webinars, which will be held under the Northwest Europe programme, is to take place on the 20th of May. And this topic will cover towards a greener Northwest Europe, and it's going to cover areas like climate adaptation, energy transition, the circular economy. The second webinar is due to take place in June. Date is to be confirmed, but it will focus on a smarter and more inclusive Europe. So the overall aim of the webinar format is to network and learn about the project's impact and the future or upcoming Northwest Europe programme. The intention is that it will be very interactive. It will allow you or facilitate you to network with other stakeholders under these particular topics or in your particular field. Anyone that has an interest in these areas or in the Northwest Europe programme in particular are welcome or encouraged to attend. And again, we just always encourage active participation in those. Just to note, the deadline for registration for the Greener Northwest Europe, the first of the events due to take place on the 20th. So the deadline for registration is the 10th of May at noon Central European time. Registration is free of charge but is compulsory. So if you do want to attend, you will have to register before the 10th of May via a registration form. So Catherine is going to post details on the registration details on the chat function. If you don't take those, you'll be able to get them on our website, or you can contact Sarah, the contact point, directly. And again, her contact details are on our website. Thank you. Okay, so back to the main event. I think we were very lucky to have Stefan here with us today to host the event. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Stefan, he has been working with UCC as their commuter plan manager for over 10 years now, and he's been in charge of sustainable travel to and from the university. With his background as a transport planning engineer, he's also one of the founding members of Cork's Transport and Mobility Forum, which is a cross-sectoral group of over 20 organisations who have a common interest in sustainable travel in Cork. As the TMF's chair until this year, he moderated the forum and he remains heavily involved in its numerous initiatives and public events, such as the annual public mixed remote seminars. He also represents Cork City's Public Participation Network on the City Council's Roads and Transport Strategic Policy Committee and has done so since 2015. Through his various functions, he's highly experienced in moderating both public and internal debates among different types of stakeholders, making a case for sustainable travel and city development. I think you'll agree we're all lucky to have him, and I'll pass you over to Stefan's capable hands.
All right, thank you very much, Karen, and a very warm good morning here from Cork on a very sunny spring morning. Yes, thank you for the introduction, Karen, and just to reiterate the housekeeping, if you have any questions, please either use the chat or better after Kate's keynote speech, just turn on your cameras and we will take your question then directly into the discussion. So now I have the pleasure to do the next introduction. We're very happy to have Kate Morris this morning here as a keynote speaker. Kate is the head of Campus Engaged, which is based with the Irish University Association. She works on behalf of the 7 universities of Ireland to embed, scale, and promote engaged research and innovation for societal impact. Over the past 15 years, Kate has worked to create systemic change across Irish and EU higher education, practice, and policy to ensure research and innovation outcomes are driven with and for society to address our greatest societal changes that we face today and tomorrow. So we're looking very much forward to your keynote speech. Kate, the floor is yours.
Okay, first off, quick sound check. You can all hear me okay? Yeah, Stefan, you could, yeah, fantastic. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for the invitation to be here. It is a brilliant opportunity for us, for Campus Engage, for the Irish Universities Association, to engage with an audience that we don't always have the privilege to engage with. So thank you for this, and we're always keen to build new contacts and build new colleagues and friends. So as Stefan mentioned, we're based in the Irish Universities Association, and this is where the 7 presidents of the universities come together to horizon scan, make sure that the institutions and the roles and the remits are fit for purpose. And our gig is all about encouraging staff, students, researchers, innovators to work with society to ensure that public investment in research and innovation across whether Irish government investment or EU is working with and for society, because we truly believe that this is the way to plan and to realize impact. So why engage with the public? I'm going to speak a little bit today about the why, who people should be speaking with and how to do it, some touch on methodologies, but also really contemporary issue at the moment is the online struggle, and we're all Zoom fatigued. We're going to talk about some tips and tricks and the tech to support your engagement in EU projects and other personal projects for success. So as we're all aware, the European Union, government departments and agencies are always tasked with developing and delivering detailed policies and work programmes to address our complex societal challenges, of course, health services, housing, climate action, etc. Our current government programme for government is committed in detail in the documentation to an engagement model, a new engagement model to address these challenges for impact. And these, of course, all policy commitments, including things like ending direct provision, the reduction of carbon emissions or net zero by 2015, an incredible challenge. You know, how there's a lot of writing in the press and by Kevin and others, and how do we reach these targets? And you can see some of the fallout as well from not engaging with stakeholders effectively. So if you go through the broadsheets, but we've also seen over the last year that COVID-19 and this health crisis has demonstrated the efficacy of government and society working together. You know, we've seen that this extra capacity that is offered when government gains when working with researchers, when working with practitioners, innovators, new product developers, the public, to inform policy and practice decisions. And we've seen over the last 14 months and witnessed that this scientific data, this practitioner insight, tacit knowledge, public insights and public buy-in are fundamental to controlling the threat of COVID and ensuring a response to protocols and various policies that have been put in place. And Campus Engage and our colleagues and members would argue that this connective tissue and this connectedness is now pivotal to rebuilding not only our own personal well-being, but also the social and the economic well-being of Ireland and the European Union. So this authentic engagement, it can open doors and it can build trust with local and European and national communities of practice and our stakeholders in our various projects. So this is back to the why we engage. It's about building trust. It also opens access to new knowledge and also that public buy-in, or whoever your stakeholders are, their personal buy-in to active collaboration to deliver on your target actions. It also can guide decisions around making, guide decisions based on the cause and the effect of a societal challenge. So under better understanding of what is that cause and what is that effect and what are the various actions and the outcomes that need to be achieved to deliver impact. It facilitates the participation of usually so traditionally underrepresented voices or marginalized groups in the policy research and the design of new programs such as early intervention, prevention programs in community settings, or any type of program. And it can also support the implementation of these programs for success. So fundamental, again, is to buy in for big political decisions like our climate action bill, is the support of the public for, and in particular, an attitudinal and behavioural change of citizens, for example, in that case, and to get their involvement, because we're never going to reach net zero unless each and every one of us buys in and takes action. So that connects into this better opportunity for longer term impact. And we all know what happens when we don't engage with the public. I mean, we have case studies left, right and centre, such as the Irish water fiasco, and not properly understanding the issues, the concerns of public when you put in place particular policies or particular legislation that just simply will not work for some members of society. So it's about understanding the necessity to consult, to get a better understanding of the tacit knowledge of all stakeholders, whether that's policymakers, health practitioners, public, government officials, etc. So if you wouldn't mind just throwing up my first slide there, I'm not going to talk too much to slides, but I'm going to share with you just a couple of slides that we use. We do a lot of training. So at Science Foundation Ireland, which is our main funding agency for science and innovation, they come to us and ask us to train their staff and their PIs and newer researchers. And I'm going to just throw up a couple of slides, and also do Irish Research Council. We train a lot of their recent awardees. I'm going to throw up a couple of slides that we use in the training just to give you tools and tricks to use post conversation. The first one is this one. It's on who should you or could you potentially be engaging with. This is a slide from our colleagues in the UK that we use in a cooperative training program with them. So there's various groups or categories of stakeholders. Of course, there's the general public. There is civil society. There is the public sector, and of course our business communities. And these can be broken down further into various potential stakeholders or partners for you to work with, such as social enterprise, bigger businesses, non-governmental organizations, voluntary organizations, or schools, colleges, lifelong learning institutions, etc., health and wellbeing agencies. So this is just a flavor of the who you potentially can start building into your project planning. And a fundamental piece that we put in place here is that you must plan for your project success and impact from the very, very outset. That's a whole other day's training, but we highly recommend on using kind of systemic models or logic modeling for change. And that's about bringing your project stakeholders into the planning discussion from the very, very get-go. Before you plan your Gantt charts or your implementation plans, they've got to be part of the conversation from the get-go. If you wouldn't mind just flicking on to the next slide, a couple of slides here to get through. And the next slide is about the how. This is another diagram that we've used most recently in a UCD training session, and it's been developed by our colleagues in the Public Engagement Centre in UCD. And this looks at the various types of engagement. Okay, so it's across a spectrum. So there's at the kind of heart of this avocado model, as it's often referred to, is the collaborating. The space for true collaboration, and that is through things like participative action research, through partnership agreements, shared decision-making processes. And then you move out from the very center of that avocado to the more consulting with your stakeholder processes, such as through committee representation, stakeholder dialogue, public as researchers, like fantastic citizen science experiments, or involvement of the public in things like biodiversity tracking, and which many of our audience members might be not only running or involved in, but have an invested civic involvement in too. Out from that, again, there's more of an informing and inspiring activities, such as people's panels, citizens' juries. I'm sitting on an expert group with the oversight of a citizens' jury on health information data with IPOSI and the HSC and the Health Research Board. And it's fascinating. It's a fascinating exercise, gathering information on how the public and how citizens want their health information to be treated into the future. Also other activities like opinions polls, social research, surveys. And then on the very outside of this diagram, there's other types of activities like podcasts, using social media, festivals, lecture talks, getting on TV. We're going to be running a series of TV documentary series on RTE later in the autumn on this whole area of engaged research for societal impact, and showcasing a series of high impact research activities across the Irish universities and how they are working with and for society to deliver impact. So just if you could flick on to another slide. This is the end of the slides, but I think this is important, and I'm really trying to encourage you to use some of these tricks and tools that are out there online. This is a particular tool that I think is fantastic, and I think it'll be particularly useful for this audience. It's an EU commissioned project, and it has gathered a whole series of effective online or offline methodologies to engage with your stakeholders. Again, everything from citizen science, citizens assembly. Our own citizens assembly gave the results of the most recent assembly on the changing constitution 4.28 on women's place in the home. And we spoke with the fantastic Mary-Claire Sullivan, who's leading out on that on behalf of the Department of Taoiseach last week in our webinar. But this catalogue is a really useful tool. It asks you to choose your audience, choose your geographical location, choose what you want to change with policy, program development, and it offers a particular methodology for you to use for that activity. It's a couple of years up and running, but we use it a lot in our training sessions, and it's got a great response. There's some rain here in Dublin. I don't know if you can hear it in the background, but apologies for that. So that's that. That's just a little bit about the kind of the who, the how, and the why. And now I'm going to chat just briefly. I'm going to close out on this, but I'm on Friday, as I mentioned, we held a seminar online. It was really a knowledge exchange event. People are fed up of being talked at, so I think this type of setting here again is fantastic because it's going to give us an opportunity to discuss. So we held this seminar or this knowledge exchange event on Friday, and we were putting it out to some of our nearest and dearest, and it exploded. And the theme of this seminar, this knowledge exchange event, was about how to do engagement online. We hope for maybe 100 or so colleagues to join, and we had 300 people signed up within 5 or 6 days. So there's huge appetite for this space across the sector. And why? It's because Horizon Europe specifically is asking for this type of engagement across its 3 pillars. And there is a capacity and a competency and an understanding of the how-to in this space. So we're here to help you and to try and support that for success. So engagement online, it has lots of positive and it has lots of negative. And I think some individuals are really feeling the pinch and feeling isolated and trying to tackle how to deliver their projects in an online environment. And the fact is that it's not going anywhere. So we have to grapple with this. We have to grapple with the technology, and we have to get our heads around how to use it effectively. So we have produced a how-to guide called Still Connecting that I think Rose is going to pop into the chat, along with a couple of other guides that we also highly support and publicize, such as the National Disability Guide on how to run accessible online meetings, and the Fast Track for Impact Guide. Similarly, gives tips and tricks how to do this. But our own guide, Still Connecting and Doing Engaged Research and Innovation Online, it talks about the positives. So the positives in this space are the following. You know, you can attract a much more geographically dispersed participant demographic to your sessions due to the fact that Mary Murphy doesn't have to get a lift to the bus station, hop on a bus and take a taxi to get to your hotel or your office space. That's an incredible advantage. You know, your numbers can be significantly impacted by that. It's also cheaper for us to organise and to deliver these types of workshops online. We've the opportunity to participate at the same level. There's no kind of hierarchical system online, you know, and that's an added bonus. And we can easily use images and PowerPoint and video clips on platforms, which is also positive. However, of course, we're well aware, as mentioned previously, that there are negatives. And these are things like the inability to read a room. It's very hard to read participants' sense of involvement or anguish or disgruntlement when you're online. And those are the things we can pick up and kind of address when we're in a round table or people can hop up and speak to a mic. But also the kind of digital distractions for participants, whether it's phones or other bits of technology. I personally find most frustrating is that there's very little opportunity to informally network one-to-one over a coffee and a bun or whatever at the start. And these are the points that many of you probably know are the opportunity to make that really excellent connect with your colleagues. There's little opportunity for spontaneity as well online. And also sometimes there's issues around equal access due to slower broadband. Some people have no device, they don't have a laptop, they don't have an iPhone, etc. Or some people just have low literacy in online activity. I know my own parents, for example, would have very low literacy in terms of online engagement, next to zero. And you've got to think about these issues when you're planning your online activity. You might be specifically wanting to work with a group in Alzheimer's, dementia, and how do you figure that online? So it's going to need a lot more preparation to deliver for success. So I'm going to close out now on a couple of key points. And I think one of the key points is how do we build trust? I think this is a fundamental thing for project success. And I've learned it over the years. I'm 8 years now at Campus Engage, and I know building my teams and giving effective leadership and realizing success is about building trust with your partners, building that kind of team spirit for success. And this is tricky online, especially if you're building new projects and building new teams. So, you know, you've an issue around eye contact, proper eye contact, people can turn off their cameras, and, you know, the impact on the facilitator, etc. Not paying attention or sitting in shadows or with silhouettes in the back. And these are all things that we have to find a way to overcome in this online setting. So I have a few top tips here. I think one is find a fantastic co-facilitator. They don't even have to be fantastic, just somebody who's committed to supporting you in that role of delivering online training or online meetings or online workshops or whatever it is. Set the tone and make sure that everybody feels welcome and comfortable. And this is really important to, you know, to pick out people who might specifically feel a little less in the group and make them feel welcome. Have clear expectations, have clear outputs and intended outcomes of that meeting or that activity. People want to feel that there is a purpose and they're not wasting their time. People who shouldn't be there should not be invited to come to meetings or activities or various interventions. Schedule at an appropriate time, not 9 a.m. on a Monday morning when everyone's just facing the fact of a full week ahead. Be or try and be neutral to your device that you choose so that it can, you know, whatever your online activity, that it's iPhone, laptop and desktop appropriate. Always test the tech. Make sure that you've done a trial in advance. You know, give yourself time in advance to test the tech, and always prepare to fail, because it will. You know, I've been in that situation many times. The most vital moment, and the tech fails. So, you know, prepare to fail and have a backup plan. I think what works well is inviting people in advance of the meeting. So bring them in to chat in advance and get to know each other. Ask them to, you know, get a cup of coffee and have a little pre-meeting chat. That's useful. Use the breakout rooms. I know it's tricky when you have an audience of more than 100 individuals with Zoom, but if and when you can, use the breakout rooms. Learn the tech and learn how to use those breakout rooms for effect. We often use Slido and Mentimeter to seek out opinions with wider groups of more than 100. You know, you want to seek out that tacit information again on, you know, what are your needs now? What do you think your future needs are? What are the challenges for you in this specific area? And build that qualitative information that can help you to inform your project, your plan, your intervention for success. Always look for reflections after the workshop. You know, once the workshop or the activity or whatever it is closed out, reach out again, attach, you know, the latest documentation, attach the evaluations, and always make that follow-up. Finally, gather the data. You know, if you've got new people coming into workshops or coming into meetings or new activities, and they're new audiences for you, get them to sign up to your newsletters, get them to sign into or to link into your Twitter, and start building those relations. Data is key. You know, making those personal new relationships and contacts, I have found over the last year, has been extraordinarily beneficial to working online. I'm finding it much easier to work with government officials or leaders, directors of funding agency projects or protocol or programs for funding. So I think, yeah, we're all burnt out. We all have Zoom fatigue. We're all exhausted and fed up with this year. But, you know, this online platform, it's not really going anywhere. So we've got to tackle it. We've got to use it to our advantage. You know, as things are, we saw today in the media, things are beginning to kind of open up over the next few months, which is fantastic, all for our personal health and well-being, and of course others within family members getting vaccinated or whatnot. But I truly believe, and as does the research in this space, evidence that this online platforms, they're not going anywhere. So use the tips, use the tricks and the tech that I've offered to you today. Please do, you know, read the how-to guide as well and get familiar with some of the content in there. You have my email address. We're all Twitter. We're at campus_engage. And we'd love you to follow us on Twitter. We release a lot of information on new guides, tools, funding calls, seminars, etc. So that's it for me. And thanks a million for the opportunity again to share some of our insights, and we'd be delighted to take some questions and answers, but more importantly to hear from people in the audience. What are your challenges? How can we better connect and offer insights and top tips for everyone?
Okay, thanks very much, Kate, for your very insightful presentation. And what I take along with it is we are living in challenging times. We will face challenges over the next decades. If it isn't COVID, it might be a next pandemic, and it's definitely climate change that we need to tackle. And it is something that can't be tackled only in the ivory tower. It needs to be with society. Everybody needs to be taken along, because we need the buy-in of everybody. And COVID actually this year, or last year, for 40 months now, has kind of demonstrated us, let's say, from 0 to 100 overnight, that we also must change, that we must adapt to situations. And there is pros and cons, there is challenges, but also big opportunities in this whole going online. As you said, people can just convene from all over the country. I have participated in webinars or in meetings that I would have never participated in if they weren't online. On the other hand, you've pointed out the challenges, and I think there is lots of room now for discussion, lots of questions. How do people deal with this going forward? Because, as you said, these online platforms are here to stay. We might get back to a mix of in-person and online events. So how can we take the most out of it? How can we benefit the most out of this upcoming situation? So I'd say the floor is open now for questions, or also comments or statements, questions to Kate Morris. So please turn on your cameras. I have no questions here in the chat so far. So if you have any questions, please turn on your camera, and then we will call on you to ask a question to Kate.
Stefan, can I ask a question, actually, if that's okay?
Yeah, please. Rose, go ahead.
First of all, thank you very much, Kate, for your insightful presentation. I have put up the links to the relevant documents, the Campus Engage online engagement publication and the National Disability Association running accessible online meetings, and the tips and tools from Fast Track Impact. I've actually read those, so I would encourage everyone to copy those links while they're there in the chat at the moment, because I have found them very useful to us, and there's some great information to help and support you. So thank you for that, Kate. My question, I suppose, is in relation to the next programming period. While at the moment we're dealing with a pandemic and everything is online and everything is virtual and all our engagement is that way, but going forward, given the green agenda that Europe has, the reality of it is, for ETC programs and projects, there is a distinct possibility that the amount of physical meetings will not be, I won't say permissible, but will be certainly reduced, I would think, in the next programming period, because we're obviously, our air miles are having a significant impact on our carbon footprint, and therefore we're probably going to be encouraged to do a mix of both, as Stefan said, both physical meetings and online meetings and online engagement going forward. I'm just wondering, Kate, if you have a view as to whether you think that that is likely to be the case going forward?
So the Irish Universities Association, we try to do a lot of horizon scanning, and we try to plan for the future through whether issuing research or commissioning research, or and we work closely with IBEC, and we work closely with with various government agencies, trying to get a sense of the pulse across at a global level. You know, so first off, you look at your own situation, and then you go off and you do an international scan or evidence review on what's going on at a global level. And very much the sense is that this online methodology for engagement, or system for engaging is going to be the future, specifically if we are going to be individually tasked with playing our part in the reduction of emissions to reach net zero by 2050. And you know, and that's I'm really encouraging the individuals who are signed in today to think about and to get more training and to really upskill themselves on hosting, running, and learning about different methodologies for engagement and using the online tech to support that. We have a brilliant facilitator that we work with called Michael Foley from Trinity College Dublin. He works specifically in TILDA, which is the Aging Longitudinal Study, and he's got some, you know, fairly tricky audiences to try and work with online, but he does it exceptionally well, and he's brilliant. And you know, maybe there's an opportunity to do some further training with your colleagues here with Michael, if needed. But it's really important that you empower yourself and have that confidence on how to use the tech to realize impact. It's a very different environment, we get that, but it is so much potential, and it is there's so much opportunity to reach the really hard to reach communities. I mean, again, this is about reach of audience, yeah. So if you're bringing people to a hotel room or, you know, a conference center or an offices in a county council, it's really hard for people to, you know, get the organize transport potentially, you know, to fund it, all of the, you know, the receipts, gathering your receipts, all that. Oh, exhausting activity, a lot of bureaucracy. Here we can just log on, you know, get the most out of it, reach the really hard to reach individuals down in, you know, Castletown Bear to Mallinhead to Mizenhead, and we can do it online, but we have to do it effectively. You know, we have to do it in a way that is, it's not just doing it for ticking boxes. It's got to be, you know, we've got to plan for the meetings well to realize what we want to get out of them. You know, what are the outputs from this meeting? What are the general outcomes? Who's taking responsibility for different actions that come out of the meetings or out of the various activities? So as I mentioned, the Citizens Assembly, you know, had about 100 plus individuals, citizens like you and I, come together. Huge task about like flipping the assembly from an in-person setting to an online setting, but it worked equally as well, with actually much better online traction in terms of social media and better engagement online, and in terms of buying in and listening to the various outcomes of the meetings and whatnot. So to great success. So there isn't the Engage 2020 toolkit. I really like participants to have a little go of that. I think it's an exceptional online tool to help you to understand what type of activity you can use to bring your colleagues together. It can be anything. So a couple of years ago, we used a World Cafe type intervention to gather insights on building an action plan for Campus Engage for the following 3 years. And we did that with our colleagues in UL who hosted and facilitated it. And it was brilliant. We had everybody from professors from Oxford to, you know, young jigsaw mental health well-being participants in the audience, advocates. It was just a very broad range of individuals, presidents of the universities, coming together to plan a strategy for Campus Engage to extraordinary effect. And I'm heartbroken trying to deliver it now. But you know, there is huge potential from this, and as I mentioned before, this is about realizing societal impact at the end of the day. Okay, so it's all of this funding and finance that goes into projects, whether it's research, whether it's, you know, early intervention prevention programs. The evidence will say that the more you engage, the more you listen, take note, negotiate, and adapt your activities to bring in the key stakeholders, the much better likelihood and the much more increased likelihood you will have of realizing success and making an effect in a community, in a local national setting. It's just kind of cop on, really, in a way. But you know, it's about doing it effectively and doing it authentically. There's a lot of public consultations out there at the moment on climate action, on, you know, the implementation of the SDGs, and you know, how much of that is listened to, how much is taken on board. It's much more effective rather than just written paper, you know, posting in your get people around tables, get them talking, start really listening and negotiating. This is all about negotiation as well. We've seen that the fallout in the most recent strategy for our climate action plans. The significant fallout around the table because of lack of compromise negotiation, and that is really, it's a real issue, I would suggest, in terms of realizing success. They've all got to get back at the table and renegotiate how to. Stephen, you're much better informed in this department than I am. What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and I do think when you engage stakeholders, in my experience, when you engage stakeholders, they have to feel that they're making a valuable contribution, and not that you're ticking a box. Or we've engaged with stakeholders or the public or whatever. It has to be that they're having an impact on the policy decision or the societal change that you're trying to implement or enhance or improve. And if they don't feel that their contribution is being valued through the engagement process, then you won't get buy-in from them. So that would be our experience. But thank you very much for that, Kate. Much appreciated.
Yeah. Just to confirm what Rose just said, we ourselves make that experience through our submissions we do through the Transport and Mobility Forum, or also through the Cork Cycling campaign that I'm much involved with. You need the feedback. You need to feel that your concerns, that your points that you submit are being taken on board. One question that I would be interested in, and I would encourage people to talk about their experiences with that, is the switch to online platforms now, to the Zooms and GoTos and MS Teams of this world. What is your experience? Has it worked okay for you? Has it attracted different audiences? I could imagine maybe if you have events in the evening, parents might be more available because otherwise they wouldn't be able to join a meeting because they can't leave the house. So on and so forth. Would you feel like others are more left out? What are people's experiences with switching to online engagement? Yeah, Donald, please.
Hi, Stefan. The hardest part for me has been keeping the users engaged, because you mentioned that a lot of people have this Zoom burnout. And what I found, at least in my engagements with my stakeholders, I'll try to keep it a little bit interactive, like having a poll, or having, rather than waiting to the end, to have an open questions, to kind of in between the different topics allow the users to ask their questions, rather than if you had let's say an agenda with 3 topics, wait to the end to ask your questions about the first point. So in terms of reaching out, what I struggle is sometimes, because it's my projects are very heavy on the science, to try to engage with the general public. I struggle with that interaction. Would you be able to give me an advice how to make that transition between the academics to the general public?
What's your specific scientific area of expertise, Donald?
Oh, photonics, physics.
Physics, yeah. It's interesting. We were so just a case study, and I can point you in the right direction. So we've been working with the European Research Council over the last year, and they invited us to speak at the European Commission's Innovations Day. You know, you might be familiar with that. They've up to 5,000 people who get involved in an online conference this year. And we had a number of people from the hard science background, including someone from a physics background, who was using all sorts of multimedia and actually theatre. No pressure now, Donald, but using arts and artists, and they created theatre production on how to explain different mechanisms or different scientific processes and theories in terms of physics, and it was extraordinarily extraordinary. So I can pass you on some of that detail. But European Research Council awardees now are able to apply for a specific award for engagement, and they're breaking it into. I was a part of a panel that was advising them on this new award, and they're breaking it into 3 categories, I believe. One, which is so it's involvement, so public research involvement, and then one looking at media, and then one looking at outreach. But there are definitely methodologies, and I would encourage you, I put in there the actioncatalog.eu/search. And this again will help you to choose a methodology or an intervention to support you to explain your research better, or it's not a bad idea to actually also to work with external experts in that area. There's a lot of people who use like comedy, arts, various interventions to help them convey their key messages to the public. But that's specifically if your research needs to do that. You've got to think about what is the real need of your particular research project, and it might not be about doing those type of interventions or in-school outreach programs. And you might be much better focusing your energy and your insights into writing a policy briefing for a government official to inform them on a better way to reduce carbon emissions through air travel, different systems or new interventions or whatever it is. So I think choose your methods to communicate and to influence decision making carefully, and not to waste energy and time in the wrong spaces or with the wrong audiences. I think our government officials will absolutely put their hands up in the air and say, look, we're not the experts. We need you, the expert scientists, to help us and to write that very shorthand key message policy briefing, which you send to that policy decision maker to influence decisions and whatnot. And also the coming together of communities of practice, whether it's around sustainable development. The Royal Irish Academy is an excellent scientific committee. Paul Bulger and Brian McGallagher are involved in that, and building your community of practice and power in numbers, to influence on very specific change, policy change issues. And there's going to be much greater focus on research and innovation for policy, Donal, into the future, I understand. So connecting the university experts in with specific policymakers to support them to make informed decisions. And we'll be working on that with others into the future.
I think we have room for one or two more questions. What are people's experiences? I can imagine it's very hard, especially the more into deep science you are, to translate that or to communicate that to a general public. But what are other people's experiences? What are other people's questions in terms of engaging with the general public or going online? So one or two questions maybe. So I take that Kate, you have covered a lot actually, and Karen, do you want to?
Yes, Stefan, I'm going to maybe a little different to me what we've been discussing, but I'm kind of thinking back to one of our previous sessions about submitting strong project proposals. And this was taking your point about, starting your planning process now. And that's something we're always trying to enforce here. Don't wait until the calls. You need to start planning now, putting together your consortiums. But then in terms of maybe planning your project output, so maybe now is the time that we start thinking about alternative methods to engage stakeholders like we've discussed today, and building in those costs. So I think your idea maybe of, an artist impression, maybe if there's any other areas like that kind of could be of interest or of use, any other tools maybe that we could start thinking about building into our costs for future projects. Because I think, like Rose said, I think we will be kind of having a hybrid approach to this going forward, and we will have to embrace this virtual life, I think, for, and that kind of mix that we're not hopping on planes for everything.
Just a top tip there is that if you are planning a project, and we give this advice in our training for any type of project, is, again, I mentioned it in my short presentation, is that it is fundamental for success to involve the stakeholders of that project in the planning process. And that means like an online, we use the logic modeling approach. You probably use that as well. I'm not sure, is that familiar? It's a theory of change model where you get your stakeholders together from the get-go. Before you ask the project question, like every project should have a fundamental question, is what is the societal challenge we're trying to address? And again, it's crucial that you get the stakeholders of addressing that societal challenge together. Catherine Day did a paper on ending direct provision. there's no way that white paper can be implemented unless we get each of the stakeholders of ending direct provision in a way that is, you know, effective around the table to discuss how you make that transition, how you implement the change, and who has responsibility for X and Y. So I really encourage you to use a logic modeling, the theory of change model, which we could maybe work with you again on a different level, a different date to realize success.
Kate, as I see, there is no more questions, actually, no more cameras being turned on. Can I ask you now to give, let's say, a 3-4 minute kind of, in a nutshell, the message that you suppose should be the takeaway of today's session?
Okay, takeaways. Crikey. Okay, well, I think it's really simple. The first key message is we exist in a society where we have a serious number of very complex issues that we need to address, and government is trying to address those, and they've pointed them out in their programs of government. And a lot of people around the table here now are involved in realizing success to assess those societal challenges. Our fundamental key point is that you can't realize success, you can't address societal challenges unless you bring to the table those who are most affected by that societal challenge. It can't be just a top-down directive to do X, Y, Z. It has to be both bottom-up and top-down. Once you do that bottom-up, top-down approach, you get buy-in from everybody, potentially you get buy-in, but it increases the likelihood of buy-in from the individuals who are really fundamental to realizing impact. And that means that people will begin to do things like act on deliverables. You will have a greater chance of attitudinal change, greater chance of a cultural change. And I'm kind of speaking here particularly in terms of our recent climate action bill. Again, you know, it'll be impossible to reach those net zero targets, whether across Europe or in Ireland by 2050, unless you have every single civil society members taking personal action, and also small, medium enterprise, big multinational enterprises, public-private agencies, government agencies. We are all part of the problem. So bring people into the planning process, to the planning table for any project, any research, any innovation project that you are intending to do. Bring them into the conversation at the get-go. Have that conversation, listen to their needs, listen to the challenges, negotiate, and then together plan out your actions. Use that logic model as your kind of project template, the pitch that you put up in front of any funding agency, any collective meeting to say, this is our plan to make change. Also, I really encourage you to read our how-to guide on how to do engagement online. It's here to stay, it's not going anywhere. You've got to really get trained up in it, make sure you as an individual have the presence online as well that's necessary if you are facilitating these sessions. And also just to reach out to your universities. We're here to work with you and for you, and to make sure we're fit for purpose, that we are working together to address societal challenges through research, through innovation, through teaching and learning activity as well. So that's it for me, Stefan. I hope people have taken away some top tips and some tech solutions to support them in this space.
All right. Thanks very much, Kate, Morris, for this presentation. And my takeaway is we are facing lots of challenges. We need the buy-in from as many people as possible, if not from everybody. So we need to take everybody on board. We need to meet people where they are and take them along in the process from an earliest stage as possible. So thank you very much. And I hand back to Rose for a short wrapping up.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this morning. I hope that you found the keynote address from Kate beneficial, and I hope that you will have an opportunity to look at the links to the relevant documents that was in our chat. I invite you all now to turn on your cameras so that we can take a lovely screenshot of all those that were in attendance today for our social media. I want to thank our keynote speaker, Kate Morris, Head of Campus Engage, for your insights and your expertise and your guidance for us for our future virtual meetings and stakeholder and public engagement. I'd like to thank Stefan Kopp from Cork Transport Mobility Forum and University College Cork for your wonderful and amazing hosting skills. Thank you very much for that this morning. I'd like to thank Catherine Connaughton, our colleague who is in the background doing all the technical aspects of this morning, and Karen, who I forgot last week. Thank you very much for your support for the event as well. This is the last in our online series, but what we'll be doing after this event is we will be making the recordings of the 3 online discussions available to you. But we'd also be asking you, we'll send a survey to you to just hear from you how you found the format of these online discussions, and also to get some feedback from you as to what you would like to hear about for future ETC networks, what topics or potential speakers you would like to hear more information from. We are driven very much on the ETC network by our members and the requirement of our members, and very much to deliver to you what it is that you need going forward that can assist you in any of your projects under the ETC programs. So thank you very much for your engagement this morning. If you need to find out anything further about the ETC network, you can by all means go to the Southern Assembly website, where all the details of past events and future events will be marked. I'd like to thank you again as participants for all your engagement this morning. I hope you found the online discussion series useful, and we hope to be talking to you soon about some future events and future virtual meetings for the time being. So take care everyone and keep safe, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.